I'm Mike Belsito, Senior Director of Mind the Product and host of Product Unplugged, the web series where we talk about the good, the bad, sometimes the ugly of what it takes to build products. This series is sponsored in part by the team at Pendo, the software experience platform. A big thank you goes out to the team at Pendo for making the series possible. And with me today, I have a guest that is somebody I've known for nearly a decade at this point, which makes me sound old when I say things like that, but it's true. And it's my friend Don Pawlowski. Don is the co-founder and chief product officer of Streamline, a brand new company that we're going to learn a lot about. But Don, it's awesome having you here with us.
Dude, it's such a pleasure to hang out with you, Mike, as always, and happy to be on the podcast with you.
Yeah, well, I'm really happy to have you on as well. And I know, for this Product Unplugged series, I say the good, the bad, the ugly about what it takes to build products. We try to peel back those layers of stories and talk about, sometimes those, what I like to call like the oh no moments, the things that happen sometimes that maybe we're not talking about all the time, but it's something as a product people, it affects us all the time. And we'll get there. But I guess first things first, Streamline is, in the grand scheme of things, a pretty brand new company. Maybe we'll start with what Streamline is in the first place and kind of what is the future of Streamline.
So have you ever sat on the couch late at night? Maybe you got kids, maybe you don't have kids, you don't know what to watch. Or perhaps you're at a dinner party and someone's like, oh man, this new show is great, but you don't know where to find that show on what 17 streaming services you have. Or better yet, you're a big fan of the Guardians or the Yankees or whoever, and you want to watch your team play, but they just sold the streaming rights again to some other platform. You actually don't know how to watch the game. Or with the NFL, the Monday night games on a different platform than the Thursday night game, than the Sunday game. Streamline's there to solve that problem. So we want to bring together all your favorite shows, movies, and sports, show you where you can watch them, but also show what your friends are watching too. So you don't have to sit there and scroll through on the TV, which is a terrible interface, 7 different streaming platforms to find something what to watch. You just want to sit down, you want to turn your brain off, you want to watch TV, right? We want to facilitate that for you.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me because I have had that problem personally, for sure. And I'm old enough to remember a physical TV guide, and that would be in our living
Yes.
room. And, the Gen Z, you'll never know what it's like to have a TV guide, but literally there'd be this book you'd get every week sitting in your living room where you could turn and see what to turn on TV. But think about it these days. Yeah, yes, there are some shows that are only on TV. There are some shows that are only on streaming networks. And which streaming network is this show on versus it's become a huge problem. So yeah, I get it. Thank you for explaining that so eloquently, Don.
Thank you for the TV guide thing. I find if you're over the age of like 32, I can say we're the TV guy for streaming services.
Right.
But if you're not, if you're under that threshold,
Right.
you have no idea.
It's
Poor
lost on them.
kids.
They'll have to Google what is a TV guide, and
Uh-huh.
we'll save that for another day. But for you and Streamline, I've got to know you working in a number of different, tech companies, startup companies in the past. I'm curious about your origin story with Streamline and what, like, maybe you could take us back to that moment where you decided you were going to dedicate your career to this next journey for you with Streamline.
Sure. So I was at another kind of high flying consumer product startup that was super exciting. Had a good time there. They're still doing great, and I'm excited to see where they go. But was kind of starting to think about what's next, and met Ryan, the my co-founder, and we kind of started dating. I guess I'll say it for lack of a better term, right? We got introduced to each other, had a couple coffees, couple lunches, started showing me the product, started explaining the vision of, this is not my original idea, this is his, of where he was coming from with it. And it got really exciting. And it kind of got to that point where I was like, I guess I'm going to do another startup. I just keep ending up in kind of the startup phase. And I think it suits me well, right? I enjoy the chaos and the kind of the uncertainty and the wearing multiple hats, right? Like I'm in charge of product here, but I've also helped build the marketing team and figured out obviously the engineering falls under me too. And so, yeah, Ryan and I were just kind of having a bunch of conversations, and at one point it just clicked. It was time to move on from the last gig, and Ryan was like, "You ready?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it."
That's awesome. That's well, and I know firsthand jumping into a startup at that, you know, I'll call it day zero phase. I mean, maybe it wasn't exactly technically day zero, but it was
Right.
such early days for Streamline. You're at that very beginning stage, so early that you are a co-founder of the company, right? And I
Yeah.
know firsthand that when you're at that point, it looks different, I'd say, depending on, from company to company, like what jumping in at that point looks like. What did that look like for you? When you jumped in, I guess what phase did you feel like you were at? Was it about, getting the product created and figuring out how to acquire customers? Was it, did you have the product already, and so you're a little bit past that phase? Maybe you could talk to us about that early phase.
Yeah, so over this, it hasn't even been a year really. Ryan started mulling on this idea over a year ago, maybe even 2 years ago. This past summer, he went and got a very quick and actually pretty high quality MVP built. And it was about that time where I was entering the scene, and he started showing me what the progress of the MVP was. And I was actually blown away, having seen, get approached by a lot of people. I got this great idea. Let's build a company. And it's like, what do you have? He had something that you could prove the idea and show it to investors, right? Which is huge. And so I jumped in we've got this MVP. It's demonstrated some excitement. He was able to raise a pre-seed round with it. And we wanted to kind of launch, maybe a little bit beta launch, but we wanted to launch by November and start getting customers, users who are not friendlies to use it, to start trying to validate the idea. And so that's kind of the spot I jumped in. We had an MVP, we had to turn it into something that was actually usable in a production environment, and then see if people liked it or not. So we had to figure out what bare features we needed to go with. We did a lot of user research at the time, finding out, hey, do you have that problem where you're sitting on the couch and whatnot, and validating some of that. Started finishing to raise the round and getting, investors excited about it, and trying to set up analytics and what our process was going to be, and how we're going to build stuff, and what's important to us, what are our core values, so that we can decide how we're going to make decisions. What are we aiming for? I mean, we had nothing. Just all those
Yeah.
things. And it became kind of a whack-a-mole situation where, what do we need first to validate the next thing?
Yeah. Well, I remember having conversations with you at that stage when you were launching, even before launching, then after launching. And I remember you bringing up, I mentioned the oh no moments. I remember you bringing up onboarding as
Mm-hmm.
one potential issue where, at least at first, it was a big challenge. And maybe it was one of the, again, as a new product that's just being launched, you probably have quite a few oh no moments that are happening just depending on the
Oh
day of the
yeah,
week. But maybe you could talk about onboarding and why that was such a challenge for you in the beginning.
sure. So we kind of expanding on where I just left off, right? We've got the product in a place that we can. I don't know if we're proud of it yet, but we could show it to people without, vomiting, and started collecting that feedback, right? Product's all about, what do people want? Are we solving their actual problems? And so we're doing a lot of the interviews, a lot of qualitative kind of research, if you will. But at this point, we started setting up some analytics to figure out, what are people actually doing on this thing? How long are they sticking around? All the stuff that we all know how to do. I had not really set up an onboarding funnel yet. I don't know why. At some point, you look back and go, why did you do that? Or why didn't you do that? Right. And you think, after doing this a couple times, you'd have the playbook, or listening to podcasts like yours, or reading books, like the playbook would be well defined. But you get in the moment and so many different things are happening. You end up running a couple different playbooks kind of at the same time. And hindsight's always it's easy, it's easier to look back and criticize yourself in those moments. But I finally set up like an onboarding funnel to see what was going on and realized that only like 40% of the people that were installing the app actually like created an account and started using the app. And that was kind of like an oh no moment for me. I was like, why? What is going on with this? It's like we're just asking for an email and a password and whatever. Are they getting hung up with like, are we giving enough information and whatnot? And then I had this moment where I was at, I think it was like a Christmas dinner or something with my family. And I think it was my aunt. Sorry, Christine, if it wasn't you, but I'm going to blame you. I was like, hey, did you download Streamline yet? She's like, no, let's get it going. And she goes to download. She's like, do you really need my email address? And I was like, you're my aunt. Like, what do you mean? So it's just kind of this light bulb moment. It's like, okay, my aunt doesn't want to give me the email address. Like these random people that just found Streamline on some ad maybe don't want to do that either. And so we actually dug in. I set up the funnel, looked at it, and we found two things. One, we weren't giving enough people information on what the heck was going on with Streamline before they were giving us their email address. This is obvious, right? To every product person in the world. How are you onboarding your customers? We were doing it poorly because we just started, but it was poor. And then two, everyone was really dropping off at that email spot. And so we went into experimentation mode. How can we quickly get this from 40% to, our goal was above 60%, just to get enough people in the funnel so we can do all the other important things we had to do to validate product market fit and whatnot. And so experiment with a couple different, like kind of a startup quiz, if you will, like tell us about some shows you've liked, tell us about what sports teams you're interested in, to kind of give people a hint of what they're about to get into. That alone improved onboarding to about 55%. We had to experiment with a couple different ways to do that. And then, but we still hadn't quite hit that 60% threshold. And so we started looking around, and then someone's just like, why don't you have like Apple login? We're like, duh. Like social logins, right? You just, again, the playbook exists, but you're just in that moment, you forget about these things. Really helps to talk to smart people around you. And added the Apple login ability, and that got us almost up to 70%. So we're cruising there right now, which is for us a great spot to be in. Definitely think we can push that higher. We're starting to talk about some other iterations of like login lists options. So maybe if you just want to come check some stuff out, maybe a friend of yours shared a playlist they created in Streamline. You don't want to have to download the app, go through onboarding, create an account. I'm going to lose that user almost immediately. So we want to figure out how we can get them into the app, getting value right away. Worry about the onboard stuff later, but that's going to take some time. So at 70% onboarding, we're cool. We're going to come back to that one later.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that was an oh no moment for me.
for sure. Well, and it's a good reminder. I mean, look, you say these are things that, oh, maybe I wasn't thinking about at the time. Chances are you probably were, or even if you were, like even if it was on your list, there are only so many things that you could do right immediately, right? Like you can't, when you get to the point where you're like, all right, we can launch this out there once we do these 1,032 things. It's like, well, that gets delayed. And then all of a sudden, now your product's not out there where you're getting real feedback from Aunt Christine, which is like, that's the kind of feedback you actually need to get from people, like somebody real out there that went through the experience of using your app. So to me, it's also a good reminder of, you could think about all of the different things that you need to do. But at the end of the day, especially when it's a brand new product, especially when it's a brand new startup company, you need to prioritize. And I would imagine like speed to just getting it out of the market is a really important, that's a really important thing. So yeah, does that make sense? Would you agree with that?
1,000%. I mean, the list is hundreds of items deep. It has always been, it will always be hundreds of items deep. We only have so many time, energy, resources to put towards stuff. I mean, there's just a handful of us working on this product right now. And so, yeah, ruthless prioritization means that, especially in the beginning, like onboarding might not matter. There's some baseline features we got to get to, and then we got to open up the funnel. And I mean, I look at our priority list right now and I'm like, man, how are we even functioning as an app
Yeah.
or a company right now?
Yeah.
You know, there's those trade-offs. I mean, it's hard, and it takes. I think you have to be perfect is the enemy of the good is something I constantly think about in this situation.
When you were going through that onboarding issue that you had, I guess how much time do you spend kind of, I shouldn't even say spend, how much time do you give it before you're saying, okay, wait a minute, we're putting this out there. Onboarding looks like it could be an issue, but we got to let it cook a little bit first. I guess, is that the mindset, or is it right away you see that metric the first time, you're like, no, we need to do something about this right away, absolutely right now? How do you approach kind of reacting to something like that?
It obviously depends. For the onboarding one, once we kind of figured it out, it was one of those we're doing this now situations because especially at this moment when our whole world is just experimenting to figure out what people want, what will get them to retain, what will get them to share with their friends, which are things, we haven't spent too much time figuring out yet, but we've started poking at those a little bit. But in order to get like good statistical significance in those experiments or just any solid qualitative feedback, that top of the funnel needs to be as wide as it can be without diminishing returns, if that makes sense. And so once we're like, 40% is not enough. That was kind of an immediate, let's see if we can improve this as fast as humanly possible. There certainly are other things though that, once we identify, and I'm trying to think of a good example here, but once we identify it's a problem, it just goes like fifth on the list or something. It's like, yeah, that's really bad, but these four other things are still worse. And I'll use
Mm-hmm.
like methods like the RICE method, if you're familiar, to help quickly triage that stuff so we can move forward and figure out, do we want to work on that? We got to work on this. We only have so much time, right? One of my good friends once said, like, startups only have speed and creativity. That's all you got. And so use those to your advantage as much as possible, especially the speed one.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's a good, and yeah, it's like at the end of the day, there's probably a million different things that could use tweaking, could use improving. Maybe not all metrics are going to be the way that you'd want them to be right out of the gate, but you got to prioritize it somehow. And yeah, that using what your advantages can be as a startup, speed being one of them, seems really important, but you have to pick and choose where you're going to apply that speed. So that's a good reminder for sure. Is there, as you think about how you approached things with onboarding in particular and kind of solving that problem, and yeah, you're going to continue to improve it, but to go from 40% to 70% plus, like that's a massive improvement already, which is great. Is there anything you would do differently about how you, whether to approach the challenge, whether it's about how you'd start from day one? I mean, you mentioned things like, oh, having Apple login. Would you have done that out of the gate, or think about those things out of the gate, or again, because you can only do so much before you're actually putting your product out there, would you not do that part differently again? I guess what would you have done differently looking back?
I don't think we would have done anything differently, honestly. Because there's so many things you have to do, and you've got kind of your proof points and your goals that you want to validate, especially as a startup. It's all about speed to learning, I think, in this moment. And what are some things we got to learn? Okay, we got to learn, can we acquire customers? We got to learn, can we onboard customers? We got to learn, can we retain them? We got to learn, will they share with people, right? Those are kind of the four things I'm thinking about with this particular company that we want to validate. And that's kind of the order when we've been approaching it in. I might actually, if I can go back, kind of flip that order, because we've proven the acquisition, we've proven the onboarding now. Retention and kind of shareability is where we're going next. And I might, I'm not quite ready to do it, but I bet you in 3 months I might look back on it and be like, I wish we would have done more work on retention earlier. I just have that gut feeling coming to me recently. But with like the onboarding one, I wouldn't have done it differently, right? Because in the very beginning, before we knew we had an onboarding problem, we didn't know if Apple logins was going to solve it or not, right? Like all apps
Yeah.
have Apple login. Sure, should we just do that? maybe, but really only do it if it's going to solve a problem for us or provide some value to a customer. If you're doing it just because it exists, you've kind of tossed that speed component out the window in a startup because you're just doing stuff. We did it because we didn't know. We had a hypothesis that would solve this particular problem for us. And so we're going to go ahead and put some time and energy towards it.
Yeah. And you mentioned things like virality, retention. It sounds like tackling those issues are sort of the next phase for you in terms of finding product market fit and sort of like setting your product as this solid product for the market moving forward.
Yeah, that's the goal. So right now we're kind of in that retention mode. We've got a couple goals, hypotheses running around that we want to prove out on getting people to continue using it into week 5, week 10, what have you. We have different kind of stakes in the ground we've planted on where we want to get those certain things. There's good early indication, especially with a lot of our early users. Some of these people were people that like we said, hey, download Streamline because you're my friend and please use it, right? And obviously they do it out of the good of their hearts, but they're still using it. We're not asking them to use it. They're not using it because they're using it. And so talking to them to find out why, and we could see certain kind of communities almost forming within the platform itself right now of people that I have no idea who these people are, right? And so we've got some validity from the early users that we asked them to use it and they're continuing to use it. We've got some validity now from people that just showed up, invited their friends, they're using it together, they're seeing what each other is watching, they're creating playlists. We've been starting to talk to some of those people and find out, where'd you come from? Why are you here? And so there's a lot of like pieces of hope out there that if we nail that down and make sure we can provide that experience for everyone, retention should be pretty easy to crack. Right now, I think we've got about 3 minutes after someone downloads it to prove those couple of things. So that's what we're focusing on. How can I get you to that aha moment that these other people have found organically within 3 minutes and prove that out? A lot of experiments to run there. And obviously, if you're sticking around, you'll be more likely to share it, create that virality portion, which I think is what's going to make Streamline a more unique kind of app in this space. Is there are people who just tell you where to watch shows. That's fine. I think our addition of sports and especially like having your friends, I don't consider this like a social platform. This isn't going to go replace Reddit or anything like that. But there is a lot we've seen in our research and talking to people that I want to know what my friend is watching because I trust them over Rotten Tomatoes. And so we want to create that connection here. And the people that have are the ones that continue to use it. So we got to build that.
Yeah. Well, Don, our time has kind of flown by here. Always a good sign when that happens. I guess I'll ask one final sort of like lightning round question style question here, which is, we talked a lot about these early stages of Streamline for you, particularly that onboarding challenge you had, and talked about now that next phase. But if there's one big thing that you hope people take from this conversation, what would you want it to be?
Experiment. I mean, the fact is, like, I don't know the answer. You don't know the answers. Our customers know the answers. So put it out there, let them try it and see what works.
That's great. Well, Don, this has been a lot of fun for me getting to dig in on this with you. I hope it's fun for everybody. It's just, it's rare to get to take a peek at this stage of a product right when it's in, kind of finding its footing. So thank you for opening up the book and yeah, telling the story for us.
Yeah, Mike, thanks, man. Always love hanging out with you.
Absolutely. And for everybody's sake here, where can they learn more about you and your work and Streamline?
Excellent. Streamline.watch. We got one of those awesome not.com domains.
Awesome.
So go check us out there.
Check it out at streamline.watch. I know it's on the App Store as well. So download it. Feel free to give Don some feedback there. I'm sure he would love it. And
absolutely. I would absolutely love feedback. Especially if you don't like it. If you do not like the app, please tell me. Like, that's what I want to know from those people.
We're product people, right? Like that would be a gift. But anyway, thanks again, Don, for being on here with us. And thank you, everybody, for watching, for taking the time out of your day. I want to give one last shout out to the team at Pendo, the software experience platform for making this series possible. You could learn more about Pendo at pendo.io. Certainly keep track on everything that we're doing at Mind the Product at mindtheproduct.com. But that will wrap things up for today's episode, and I will see you all when I tell the next story.